of the Sustainable Development Goals. We believe that BRICS countries in general, and young people in particular, should use their collective strengths to prioritize the development paradigm, using it as a guiding principle for our work as we continue intra-BRICS cooperation across areas such as trade, education, skills development and training, economic participation and transformation, health and well-being, and social cohesion. Your Excellencies, young people in their collective believe that youth are the present and the future, and our interactions as BRICS member states cannot and should not be limited to an annual summit, which is why at our 9th Youth Summit, we presented the draft framework for the establishment of a BRICS Youth Council, which will become the coordinating body for youth development between BRICS member countries and will join formations such as the BRICS Business Council, BRICS Women's Alliance, and the new Development Bank. More importantly, the Youth Council will be a historic achievement for young people across our BRICS member states. Since the summit, leaders of youth agencies have met on 3 occasions to consider the draft declaration and framework of the BRICS Youth Council, and we are pleased to inform this summit that we have reached consensus on the establishment of a Youth Council. This will allow us to ensure deeper and stronger collaboration amongst young people. We thus implore that this summit endorse our proposal for the establishment of the BRICS Youth Council in its final declaration, in ensuring that new pathways for positive change and innovation can be realized, and in doing so, will further ensure that no young person amongst the BRICS member states gets left behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayanda Luaka, for bringing the youth voice in the BRICS Summit. Your proposals indeed are very clear and comprehensive, and we will be responding to that. It now gives me pleasure to ask His Excellency President Luis Lula da Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, to take the floor.
My dear President of the Republic of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, my dear President Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, here represented by Foreign Affairs Minister Lavrov, my dear Prime Minister Modi of India, my dear Xi Jinping, the President of the People's Republic of China, and my dear sister Dilma Rousseff, the CEO of the New Development Bank, state ministers of Brazil that are in my delegation, Mauro Vieira of Foreign Affairs, Fernando Haddad, Finance Minister of Brazil, Aniele Franco for Racial Equality, Ambassador Celso Amorim, Special International Advisor of the President, and my dear wife, Janja. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Business Forum of the BRICS, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Women's Entrepreneurial Alliance, and Madam Limbo Guzulu, representative of the Business Alliance of Women of BRICS, and the youth member, Asanda Luaka. Dear friends, it's with great joy to come back to Johannesburg, the city that was a very important stage of struggle against apartheid and that continues to inspire us to fight all forms of discrimination and inequality. And the last time that I participated in this summit meeting, 2010, I had the honor to host in Brasilia, our capital, the heads of state and government of Russia, India, and China, besides South Africa, that participated as a candidate. to become member of the BRICS. Only 1 year after that meeting, we confirmed that South Africa would join the BRICS in the first expansion of our grouping. Its inclusion made that we could better reflect the new confederation of the world power. We left that meeting strengthened. Today, we represent 41% of the world population, and we are responsible for 31% of the global GDP in terms of purchasing power parity. But we face a more complex scenario than when we met for the very first time. In few years, we went back from a benign multipolarity juncture to going back to an absolute mindset of Cold War and geopolitical lack of the sense that generates great uncertainty and corrodes multilateralism. We know very where this path could take us. The world needs to understand the risks that are involved and which are unacceptable for humanity. The BRICS, we should say that all suffer the consequences of the war. The most vulnerable population in the developing countries are the ones that are hit more in an unproportional way. The Ukraine war shows the limitations of the UN Security Council. Many other conflicts and crises do not have the same attention, and the BRICS is a forum to discuss the main issues that affect peace and world security. We cannot bypass the treat. The main conflict of today that is happening in Ukraine that has global effects. Brazil has an historical position in the defense of the sovereignty and integrity of the territory and of all the principles that are followed by the UN. We believe that it is positive that a growing number of countries, amongst them the BRICS countries, also are engaged in direct contact with Moscow and with Kiev. We do not underestimate the difficulties to reach peace, and either we can be indifferent to the deaths and the destruction that increase every day. Brazil does not contemplate unilateral formulas for peace. We are ready to join efforts that we can effectively contribute for immediate ceasefire and a fair and everlasting peace. Everybody suffers with the consequences of the war. The most vulnerable population in the developing countries are the ones that are reached in an unproportional way. The Ukraine war shows the limitations of the UN Security Council. Many other conflicts and crises do not receive the due attention, even causing vast suffering for their peoples. Haitians, Yemenites, Syrian, Libyans, and Sudanese, and Palestinians all deserve to live in peace. It is unacceptable that global military spending in 1 year goes beyond $2 trillion, while the FAO says to us that 735 million people are in hunger every day in the world. The quest for peace is a collective obligation and an imperative for a fair development and sustainable development. The BRICS should act as a force for understanding and for cooperation. Our willingness is expressed in the contributions given by China, South Africa, and from my own country in all the endeavors to conflict resolution in Ukraine. There are many places while men go to war, the women are the ones that fight for conciliation. The valuation and the strengthening of the role of women in the resolution of conflicts will be more and more central for peace in the world. And more than that, the women's empowerment is a precondition for a full socioeconomic development. And paraphrasing Thomas Sankara, a great Pan-African leader, which says, we cannot hope for a society where half of the population is silenced by male chauvinism and by discrimination in political participation and in the world of labor. Dear friends, The weakening of the global governance is also clear in the development agendas, in financing, and in the confrontation with climate change. When I came back to the presidency in Brazil, I was very sad to see that the implementation of the 2030 agenda is under risk in all the world. A recent report from the UN indicates that we're in a strong backwardness. We see the greatest increase of inequality between the countries in more than in the last 3 decades. In 30% of the goals, we stagnated or we're going backwards. It's very difficult to fight climate change while many developing countries still have to deal with hunger, poverty, and other kinds of violence. The principle of common and shared responsibility, but differentiated, is something that is true till today. The major response for the carbon emissions that cause the climate change were those countries that made their industrial revolution and feeded predatory colonial extractivism. They have an historical debt with the planet Earth and with humanity. We need to value the Paris Agreement and the Climate Convention instead of outsourcing climate responsibilities for the global South. Brazil is recovering its protagonism on the environmental agenda. The coordination with other developing countries that carry tropical forests to act as the climate change copes and biodiversity copes will be vital to give way to our interests. In the summit meeting, the Amazon rainforest that was held some days ago was a landmark for the necessary construction of a sustainable development model with more fairness. Our resources should not be exploited for the benefit of few, but valued and placed to service all, and above all, for the well-being of the local populations. And more than that, so that the promises that were already done by the rich countries should be fulfilled, climate financing and biodiversity should be truly new and additional in relationship to the traditional financing to development. We need an international financial system that, instead of feeding the inequalities, should help the medium and low income countries to implement structural changes. This will only happen with an adequate representation of the Bretton Woods institutions and their climatic funds. Foreign indebtedness refrains sustainable development. It's inadmissible that the developing countries should be penalized with interest rates that are 8 times higher than the ones that are charged in the rich countries. It is necessary to increase liquidity, to enhance concessional financing, and last but not the least, the conditionalities. The trade multilateral system should be reactivated so it can come back and act as a tool for fair trade, predictable, equitable, and non-discriminatory. No one anymore remembers the development round of the WTO. The decarbonization of our economies should be followed by the job creation with dignity, industrialization, and green infrastructure and public services for all. Through the new development bank, we can offer our own alternatives for adequate financing that will attend or meet the needs of the global South. I'm sure that under the leadership of my sister Dilma Rousseff, the bank will manage to face these challenges. The creation of a common valued unit for our trade transactions and investments for the BRICS countries will increase our payment options and reduce our vulnerabilities. Presidents, today and guests, today the BRICS are fully consolidated as a brand and as a political asset of strategic value. The participation of dozens of heads of government and state tomorrow in the enhanced session will represent an historical landmark. The interest of many countries to join the BRICS is the recognition of its growing relevance. And also, we will have a troika at the G20 as members of the BRICS in the period 2023. And so it's another opportunity for us to make advancement of the concerns of the global south with the inequalities and with sustainable development. That the momentum that motivated the creation of BRICS 15 years ago continue to inspire us in building a multipolar, fair, and inclusive international order. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, Your Excellency, President Lula da Silva, Your Excellency, President Vladimir Putin, Your Excellency, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We gather at a time when the world is undergoing major shifts, division, and regrouping. It has entered a new period of turbulence and transformation. We, the BRICS countries, should always bear in mind our founding purpose of strengthening ourselves through unity, act on a strong sense of responsibility, enhance cooperation across the board, and promote high-quality development, so as to bring to the world more certainty, stability, and a positive energy. We should deepen business and financial cooperation to boost economic growth. Development is an inalienable right of all countries. It is not a privilege reserved for a few. The world economic recovery remains shaky, with less than 3% of growth for the year, as estimated by some international institutions. Challenges for developing countries are even more formidable, hampering their efforts to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. We BRICS countries should be fellow companions on the journey of development and revitalization, and oppose decoupling and supply chains disruption, as well as economic coercion. We should focus on practical cooperation, particularly in such fields as digital economy, green development, and supply chain, and bolster economic, trade, and financial exchanges. China will set up a China BRICS Science and Innovation Incubation Park for the new era to support the deployment of innovation results. Under the BRICS Remote Sensing Satellite Constellation Mechanism, we will explore the establishment of a BRICS Global Remote Sensing Satellite Data and Application Cooperation Platform to provide data support for agriculture, ecological conservation, and disaster reduction in various countries. China will also work with all parties to jointly establish a BRICS framework on industrial cooperation for sustainable development as a platform of industrial coordination and project cooperation in implementing the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We should expand political and security cooperation to uphold peace and tranquility. The Cold War mentality is still haunting our world, and the geopolitical situation is getting tense. BRICS countries should keep to the direction of peaceful development and consolidate the BRICS strategic partnership. We need to make good use of the BRICS Foreign Ministers meeting, the meeting of high representatives on national security and other mechanisms. Support each other on issues concerning our respective core interests, and enhance coordination on major international and regional issues. We need to tender good offices on hotspot issues, pushing for political settlement and lowering the temperature. Artificial intelligence is a new frontier of development. It may generate enormous development dividends, but also harbors risks and challenges. Our 5 countries have agreed to launch the AI study group of BRICS Institute of Future Networks at an early date. We need to enable the study group to play its full role, further expand cooperation on AI, and step up information exchange and technological cooperation. We need to jointly fend off risks and develop AI governance frameworks and standards with broad-based consensus. So as to make AI technologies more secure, reliable, controllable, and equitable. We should increase people-to-people exchanges and promote mutual learning between civilizations. There are many civilizations and development paths in the world, and this is how the world should be. Human history will not end with a particular civilization or system. BRICS countries need to champion the spirit of inclusiveness and advocate peaceful coexistence and harmony between civilizations. We should respect all modernization paths that each country chooses on its own, and oppose ideological rivalry, systemic confrontation, and clash of civilizations. We need to make good use of such mechanisms as the BRICS Seminar on Governance, the BRICS Forum on People-to-People and Cultural Exchanges, and the Women Innovation Contest to deepen people-to-people exchanges and strengthen the bond between our peoples. China would like to propose that BRICS countries expand cooperation on education, enhance the role of the BRICS Alliance for Vocational Education, explore and set up a cooperation mechanism on digital education, and foster a paradigm of all-round cooperation on education. In addition, we also need to strengthen exchanges on traditional cultures and promote the renewal of the fine traditional cultures. We should uphold fairness and justice and improve global governance. Strengthening global governance is the right choice if the international community intends to share development opportunities and tackle global challenges. International rules must be written and upheld jointly by all countries, based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, rather than dictated by those with the strongest muscles or the loudest voice. Ganging up to form exclusive groups and packaging their own rules as international norms are even more unacceptable. BRICS countries should practice true multilateralism, stick to solidarity and oppose division, uphold the UN-centered international system, support and strengthen the WTO-centered multilateral trading system, and reject the attempt to create small circles or exclusive blocs. We need to fully leverage the role of the new development bank, push forward reform of the international financial and monetary systems, and increase the representation and voice of developing countries. I am glad to see the growing enthusiasm of developing countries about BRICS, about participating in BRICS cooperation, and quite a number of them have applied to join the BRICS cooperation mechanism. We need accelerate the BRICS expansion process, to bring more countries into the BRICS family, so as to pool our strength, pool our wisdom, to make global governance more just and equitable. Colleagues, as an ancient Chinese saying goes, designs for justice prevail, and acts for the benefit of the people succeed. The cause of BRICS champions international justice and benefits the peoples of our 5 countries. It will grow steady and strong and make greater contributions to world peace and development. Thank you.
Thank you, President Xi Jinping, for those insightful words. Yes, indeed, the world has entered a new period of turbulence, and you call upon BRICS to play an important role, notwithstanding this turbulence that the world is going through, and that the BRICS family should remain united, but more importantly should be ready to play a key role in helping to stabilize the world. And you mentioned a very important point about development, that it is not a privilege of a few. Development should be spread around so that all can benefit. And you mentioned a number of areas in which there should be development: in science, technological advancement, in innovation. And we thank you also for the offer to set up a BRICS remote data center that will help to advance the technological and innovative capability of BRICS countries, as well as developing a framework for implementing the SDGs. We thank you for that. And much as you say, the Cold War mentality continues to haunt the world, that the BRICS countries should stand on the side of peace. I think we support that, and we support the message you put forward that we should support each other on our core interests, the areas that each one of us in BRICS focus on. And artificial intelligence is a new frontier that we need to focus on, but we should also have governance of artificial intelligence, and it should be reliable and secure. And another important aspect is the people-to-people contact that we should underpin our unity in the BRICS around, and that there should be respect for the modernization paths that countries have opted for. So we thank you for that. And there should not be ideological competition. This is the calling card for BRICS countries. Empowerment of women, and also must promote traditional cultures. That too, we should say we appreciate. And yes, President Xi, you are in full support of the expansion of BRICS, as has been articulated by all BRICS members, that we stand at the cusp of expanding the BRICS family, because it is through this expansion that we will be able to have a much stronger BRICS in these turbulent times that we live in. So we await the decision that will be taken by the BRICS leaders in this regard in due course as we go on with our summit. We've now reached a stage where we now want to give the media an opportunity, as they often ask for, that once they've done quite a bit of work, they want to go and rest. So we want to give the media an opportunity to go and rest. I don't know what they do when they go to rest, whether they have a siesta or whether they go and have tea. Your Excellency President Lula da Silva, President of the Republic of Brazil, Your Excellency President Vladimir Putin, Your Excellency Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Your Excellency President Xi Jinping, Your Excellency Deputy President Paul Mashatile, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency Dilma Rousseff, President of the New Development Bank, Chair of the BRICS Business Council, Ms. Busi Mabuza, Chair of the BRICS Women's Business Alliance, Ms. Lebogang Zulu, Honorable Ministers and all guests here present, members of the diplomatic corps who are here with us. I'd like to welcome you all to South Africa and to the 15th BRICS Summit. This is the open session of our summit, so it's a pleasure and a joy to have all of you here. The BRICS partnership straddles 4 continents and 5 countries that are home to almost 3.5 billion people who live on this planet. Over the past decades, the bloc has been a major driver of global growth, of global trade and investment as well. BRICS stands for solidarity and for progress. BRICS stands for inclusivity and for a more equitable order. BRICS also stands for sustainable development. We are an inclusive formation of developing and emerging economies that are seeking to work together to benefit from our rich histories, our rich cultures, and systems to advance the prosperity of the peoples of our countries. We do so because we know that poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment are the biggest challenges facing humanity. We are therefore determined that the BRICS partnership, which has been growing in importance and influence over the years, must be harnessed to drive an inclusive global economic recovery. Advancing the African agenda for us is a strategic priority as South Africa during its chairship of BRICS. It is for this reason that we have chosen as the theme for this year's the strategic priority as South Africa during its chairship of BRICS and Africa, BRICS and Africa, countries with Africa in the spirit of partnership and mutual respect. We are pleased that all BRICS members, in a meaningful way, Russia has always had really good and meaningful relations with African countries. China has chosen to assist and support Africa with its aspirations for development. And all of us, in the ways that we are involved and engaged, we want to be engaged with Africa. India continues to increase its engagement and its trade with Africa. So as the BRICS family, all of us as members, we are deeply invested and deeply engaged with Africa. Our objectives are reciprocal trade and investment. We want the goods and products and services from Africa to compete on an equal footing on the global economy. The African Continental Free Trade Area, once fully operational, will unlock the benefits of the continental market and generate mutually beneficial opportunities for both African and BRICS countries. As nations of the world confront the effects of climate change, we must ensure that the transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient future is just, it must be fair, and it must be able to take into account the different circumstances that prevail in all countries. In line with this objective, BRICS nations need to advance the interests of the Global South and call for industrialized countries to honor their commitments to support climate actions by developing economic progress. The commitments of support that have been made that have not yet been lived up to need to be followed through. Peace and stability are preconditions for a better, more equitable world. We are deeply concerned about conflicts across the world that continue to cause a great deal of suffering and hardship to many people around the world. As South Africa, our position remains that diplomacy, dialogue, negotiation, and adherence to the principles of the United Nations Charter are necessary for the peaceful and just resolution of conflicts. We are concerned that global financial and payment systems are increasingly being used as instruments of geopolitical contestation. Global economic recovery relies on predictable global payment systems and the smooth operating of banking, supply chains, trade, tourism, as well as financial flows. We will continue discussions on practical measures to facilitate trade and investment flows through the increased use of local currencies. This is a matter we believe that further discussions need to take place, particularly amongst our finance ministers. The world is changing. New economic, political, social, and technological realities for greater cooperation between nations is essential. New realities call for a fundamental reform of the institutions of global governance so that they may be more representative and better able to respond to the challenges that confront humanity. While many believe that we should advance the interests of all people, we believe that, yes, as we advance them, the interests of the Global South, that we as BRICS want to be ready to advance are essential, and in this regard, we want to collaborate more, to cooperate more with all countries that aspire to create a more inclusive international order. We are confident that this 15th BRICS Summit will advance the cause of common prosperity and progress, we are confident that this 15th BRICS Summit will in the end enrich and inspire our work towards the achievement of a much more humane global community. This is what BRICS is all about. This is what BRICS is committed to achieving. It is a great honor for us as South Africa to have this opportunity to host this 15th BRICS Summit and to have in our presence the BRICS members as they are represented here. And with those words, I open this session and then call upon one of the young leaders of our country who is also going to have an opportunity to give the words of welcome, but also to give the hope that young people in the BRICS countries hope to communicate to all of us. I call upon Ms. Asanda Luaka to speak to us. She is the chairperson of the Board of Directors of the National Youth Development Agency that seeks to advance the interests of young people in South Africa. Ms. Ayanda.
Thank you very much, Honorable President. Your Excellencies the heads of states of the BRICS countries, ministers and deputy ministers present, members of the media, leaders of business, civil society and labor, young people. It gives me great pleasure to deliver a statement on behalf of young people to the BRICS Heads of State Summit. Young people make up a large proportion of the populations of each of our respective countries. Their voices and views are critical as we forge a post-pandemic society at the highest decision-making forums. I must recognize the efforts of the organizers in ensuring that young people are represented at this particular summit. Your Excellencies, from the 18th till the 20th of July, young people from BRICS countries converged in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal for the 9th BRICS Youth Summit and the first in person since the pandemic. The summit was convened under the theme BRICS and Africa, Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development, and Inclusive Multilateralism, to discuss the current state and future prospects for the development of youth cooperation in BRICS countries over a wide range of areas. As we have entered into the decade of action of the Sustainable Development Goals, we believe that BRICS countries in general, and young people in particular, should use their collective strengths to prioritize the development paradigm, using it as a guiding principle for our work as we continue intra-BRICS cooperation across areas such as trade, education, skills development and training, economic participation and transformation, health and well-being, and social cohesion. Your Excellencies, young people in their collective believe that youth are the present and the future, and our interactions as BRICS member states cannot and should not be limited to an annual summit, which is why at our 9th Youth Summit, we presented the draft framework for the establishment of a BRICS Youth Council, which will become the coordinating body for youth development between BRICS member countries and will join formations such as the BRICS Business Council, BRICS Women's Alliance, and the New Development Bank. More importantly, the Youth Council will be a historic achievement for young people across our BRICS member states. Since the summit, leaders of youth agencies have met on 3 occasions to consider the draft declaration and framework of the BRICS Youth Council, and we are pleased to inform this summit that we have reached consensus on the establishment of a Youth Council. This will allow us to ensure deeper and stronger collaboration amongst young people. We thus implore that this summit endorse our proposal for the establishment of the BRICS Youth Council in its final declaration, in ensuring that new pathways for positive change and innovation can be realized, and in doing so will further ensure that no young person amongst the BRICS member states gets left behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayanda Luaka, for bringing the youth voice in the BRICS summit. Your proposals indeed are very clear and comprehensive, and we will be responding to that. It now gives me pleasure to ask His Excellency President Luis Lula da Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, to take the floor.
My dear President of the Republic of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, my dear President Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, here represented by Foreign Affairs Minister Lavrov, my dear Prime Minister Modi of India, my dear Xi Jinping, the President of the People's Republic of China, and my dear sister Dilma Rousseff, the CEO of the New Development Bank, state ministers of Brazil that are in my delegation, Mauro Vieira of Foreign Affairs, Fernando Haddad, Finance Minister of Brazil, Aniele Franco for Racial Equality, Ambassador Celso Amorim, Special International Advisor of the President, and my dear wife, Janja. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Business Forum of the BRICS, ladies and gentlemen,